practically a giant magnifying glass for already existing issues in our society. For years and years, advertisers have capitalized on making people feel bad about themselves and have used shame as a powerful marketing tool. Cue the montage.
The stout person, woman, or man finds it difficult to dress attractively.
Even though you've tried other methods and failed, you can still lose ugly fat fast.
Is this the day you finally do something about your weight?
I've tried fad diets, powders, pills. Still, my weight's been up and down like a yo-yo until the AIDS plan taught me how to take off weight and help keep it off.
Who'd ever think I could lose weight while watching TV?
I was fat, and that's when I decided to go to Jenny Craig.
Body fat increases from having kids, stress at work, lack of exercise, and poor diet. Now liposuction is a surgical procedure that removes this body fat.
Want to fit into the latest clothes by summer? You can do it.
With just one breath, Virimen tells you what you're currently burning for energy, carbs, or body fat.
I was at 298 when I started noon. Rock bottom, real rock bottom.
One of those ads was for a brand called AIDS, which, let me tell you, did not catch on. And of course, we are now hearing about Ozempic, the drug that will apparently make all food gross and give you the ability to read minds. But we'll talk about that later. But yeah, over the past 150 years or so, we've been pretty obsessed with weight. And while some of these weight loss ads seem antiquated and body positivity and neutrality are gaining more acceptance, this is basically the same playbook as what we have on social media. Except now, we also get to feel bad about staying indoors during a massive global pandemic, I guess. Because while the world literally burned down around us, we understandably turned to banana bread for comfort. And it didn't take long for the hashtag pandemic body backlash to take hold, ruining even the simple pleasure of distracting yourself with food that, God forbid, tastes good.
The people have gained an average of 1.5 pounds every month during shelter-in-place orders. Dr. Jennifer Ashton has much more on this. And what tips do you have for people who found themselves in this situation?
Well, Amy, spring is a great time to try to get this back on track.
Yes. Time to get rid of those pandemic bodies, people. And no, I'm not talking about the dead bodies of the nearly 7 million people who died of COVID. I'm talking about our still alive bodies that are not in the exact optimized shape according to the algorithm. Can I get one of those algorithmically approved bodies again? Goals. While getting back into shape after a world-changing pandemic seems like twisted priorities, on its face, it doesn't sound horribly damaging. And if people on Instagram are sharing stories of exercising and eating healthy, is that really a problem? There's a lot of debate on the internet about the concepts of fat shaming and fitness culture that's often extremely hard to wade through, which is weird because the internet is usually so good when it comes to discourse. You get extreme opinions on both sides of this topic, and it's generally hard to talk about without pissing off at least one corner of the internet. We're sensitive about our bodies, and we don't like the idea that we're doing something wrong. But a lot of that contention has to do with the tools we have when discussing these things. Stuff like BMI or body mass index, and also calorie counting, and the capitalistic need to have 700 different diet plans. And then there's the talk of the obesity epidemic that often gets no real analysis. Rarely does the news talk about things like food deserts, where people simply don't have access to healthy options, or how eating well is often really, really expensive. Or perhaps everyone's different, which means that being healthy actually looks different for different people. In short, the tools we use to talk about this stuff are wrong. And when you combine those wrong-ass tools with the danger and prevalence of eating disorders, the messages we're being sandblasted with on social media can often get extremely ghoulish. And very often, content promoting eating disorders can masquerade as health and wellness accounts peddling strategies for sustainable weight loss. So let's say someone opens Instagram and searches for healthy recipes. Thanks to the algorithm, you may soon find yourself inundated with "what I eat in a day" posts. On the surface, this might seem harmless, but now suddenly you're sitting there and you're thinking, wait, how many calories do I eat in a day? And then a few hours later, you're browsing your Discover section looking for videos of unlikely animal friendships, and you start seeing posts such as this one, which claim to show you how to consume fewer than 1,200 calories a day. And boy, that number sounds low. Perhaps it's bullshit. More on that later. But because the algorithm has determined that enough people have searched for 1,200 calorie diet, it'll be splashed all over your feed. And then people start searching for 1,200 calorie diet because it's all over their feed. And the cycle continues like two sphinxes caught in each other's gaze for eternity. Or like two butts farting into each other for eternity. Do we have a graphic of that last one? Well, get a graphic then, obviously. Right away. Please. Anyway, unlike most of the internet, we're not here to make you feel bad about your body. And that's going to go both ways. People are free to do whatever they want with their bodies, assuming it doesn't harm others. What we are going to talk about are the tools that I mentioned, because they do harm others. They are misguided and often insidious, especially when it comes to the internet, because the way we talk about fitness ultimately leads to some really dark shit. No, not like your stool is dark. Although I bet that can happen with certain diet pills. But whatever, I don't need to explain that any further. You understand me. And so instead, let's talk about some myths surrounding weight loss. After these ads. Oh, hell yeah. It's Katie doing the ad breaks now. Cody's dead.
I'm literally lying on the floor right next to you this whole time.
Hey there, folks! It's almost the 4th of July, and you know what that means. Fireworks, pool parties, regular parties, hunting sewer cats, chasing sewer cats, catching sewer cats, dressing sewer cats up like our founding fathers. It's a good day for freedom, unless you're sewer cats. For example, freedom from big tech with, perhaps, ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN on your phone or computer, you hide your IP address, making it way harder for tech companies to steal and sell your data. That's good freedom. Yum! ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from cyber hooligans trying to catch your data like it's some kind of sewer cat. Plus, it's easy to use. Just one click of a button and you can protect all your devices. So what are you waiting for? Visit expressvpn.com/more news to get 3 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/more news. expressvpn.com/more news. Freedom is an American tradition, like pool parties, fireworks, and chasing down an experimental graffiti artist named Sewer Cats. I'm gonna get you, Sewer Cats!
Hello, entire internet. Let's talk about wiping butts. Until now, civilization has relied on using the fur of rabbits to clean themselves after using the bathroom. At least, I'm pretty sure that's why I have so many live rabbits in my bathtub. But with Hello Tushy Bidet, you can finally eat all your old poop rabbits. Hello Tushy Bidet cleans your bum 2 times better than wiping and prevents poop particles from spreading to your hands and everything you touch. Gross! Also, it doesn't bite. Not to mention that it cuts down toilet paper use by 80%. Wait, toilet paper? Is that like some sort of rabbit breed? I don't know what this is. Listen, everyone. Hello Tushy doesn't require any additional plumbing or electricity to install, and it comes with a 60-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty. That's probably why it has over 100,000 5-star reviews. So stop driving into the forest and catching rabbits so you can wipe your butt on those rabbits, and try Hello Tushy. Go to hellotushy.com/more news and use promo code more news to get 10% off plus free shipping on your first bidet order. That's hellotushy.com/more news for 10% off. Rabbits? Rabbits are the ones with the whiskers and claws, right? Okay, and we're back. Cody's dead forever, and I'm running the show now. If that upsets you, then here's a graphic of a beard you can print out and tape to your monitor. If you recall, with your cellulite-free brain, we were talking about the tools often used for fitness goals. Stuff like BMI and specific calorie counts and other ways we set beauty and diet standards that, spoilers, is harmful hogwash. Like acid-laced hogwash. Wouldn't want to wash my hog with that. Let's start with the myth of the 1200 calorie diet. 1200 is a number you will become well acquainted with if you dip your toe into the bubbling sludge that is online diet culture. There's even a subreddit with over 400,000 members dedicated to not exceeding 1200 calories a day. If you're a woman, it's everywhere. On Instagram, there are over 100,000 posts tagged with hashtag 1200 calories. The same goes for TikTok, where videos that share 1200 calorie meal plans get tens of thousands of views and likes. Many of these posts also share hashtags like healthy or fitness, implying that this number isn't just about weight loss, but being a goal for peak health. And it's not just social media. Recently, the weight loss app Noom came under fire for recommending 1200 calories to female users, which is very, very messed up. Because, double spoilers, this number is wrong. I know. The reality is that 1200 calories is generally the absolute bare minimum that a sedentary average height assigned female at birth adult must eat before risking malnutrition. And some doctors believe that number is already far too low. In fact, 1200 calories is the bar by which researchers of eating disorder measure pathological dietary restriction in female anorexia nervosa patients. In other words, these diet plans are literally suggesting you hurt your body. So where did that number even come from? Some kind of science? Actually, no, it was the Victorians, those stuffy, repressed, child labor-loving weirdos. According to medical historian Louise Foxcroft, 1200 calories was calculated in the late Victorian period as a method for weight loss for women, which, might I remind you, is the same period where we shoved children in narrow coal shafts and literally deformed women's skeletons and rearranged their organs with corsets. So it's a tad weird that almost 200 years later, that completely unscientific Victorian number is being propagated on social media. People will share images of small, likely insufficient meals for the day, trying to stay under this random, not medically sound number. In fact, so much of our understanding about health and weight comes from wacky dead people who had a lot of weird hang-ups. Also, if they knew so much about health, why are they dead now? Check and mate. Hey, speaking of things created by silly dead losers, we should talk about BMI. You've probably heard of the BMI or body mass index, a set of numbers that can magically diagnose your health based on your weight to height ratio. It's an extremely common metric that even doctors use. So you would assume that it was invented by modern scientists using modern science, or at the very least, a really smart dead person. But it isn't. Amazingly, the body mass index is not scientifically accurate at all. Oh, sick burn, monkey. Let's get drinks later. My relationship with the title monkey is way healthier than Cody's. So, in order to tell you why you shouldn't care about body mass index, I guess I need to tell you what it is. BMI is defined by the CDC as a person's weight in kilograms divided by the square of height in meters. BMI is an inexpensive and easy screening method for weight category, but it does not diagnose the body fatness or health of an individual. In other words, BMI is a crude measure of body fat based on a ratio between height and weight. That's it. It doesn't take into account bone density, your musculature, genetics, or if you have a coato. It's just a ratio, and for that reason, it's not at all a direct measure of body fat. In fact, many professional athletes are considered clinically obese based on the BMI scale because it cannot distinguish the weight of muscle from the weight of fat. You know it's a great scientific tool when it can't distinguish between two completely different types of body tissue. So where did it even come from? The term BMI wasn't adopted until 1972. Before then, it was known as Quetelet's Index. It was invented nearly 200 years ago, back when they really understood the body and never just made things up. Its creator, Adolf Quetelet, was an academic who studied astronomy, mathematics, statistics, and sociology. He collected data on rates of crime, marriage, mental illness, mortality, and was very influential in the social sciences. He also was an avid painter and spoke several languages. That's a lot of different topics. He had his fingers in tous les tartes, which means all the pies. But you know what's odd? But I didn't mention medicine or anything like that. Yeah, this is because Quetelet was not a physician, nor did he study medicine. In fact, he was best known for his work aimed at identifying the characteristics of the average man, who, to Quetelet, wasn't average at all. The average man represented a social ideal of the perfect, big quotes, normal man based on an average of human measurements, which honestly is always right, coming from guys whose sideburns are clearly trying to strangle them. And if all of this sounds pretty eugenicsy, well, congratulations, you are correct. Quetelet never intended for his ratio to be a measure of health. He was intent on finding the perfect man, and he did so by predominantly measuring, big shock, white men. And that's it. Not even white women. And when I say measuring, I mean literally measuring. With a ruler, one assumes. One piece of data he collected, for example, was the width of Scottish men's chests. He then used that number to find a bell curve of data where the peak was considered ideal. In his potentially captivating book, A Treatise on Man and the Development of His Faculties, I won't actually read it, Quetelet wrote, if the average man were completely determined, we might consider him as the type of perfection, and everything differing from his proportion or condition would constitute deformity or disease or monstrosity. And I think this is important to highlight because this is where everything goes wrong, or even more wronger. Quetelet literally took data that has nothing to do with an individual's health and only included white men and looked at the peak of the bell curve and labeled it ideal. Not average or even normal, but ideal. And then everything over his ideal became overweight and everything under it became underweight. For everyone, everywhere, all over the world. And eventually, for some baffling reason, Quetelet's index would snake its way into public policy. Starting in the late 1800s, insurance companies began creating charts to determine risk and weight so they knew how much to charge you for your health insurance. That's it. That's how we got BMI. From a weirdo racist eugenicist who measured a bunch of Scottish dudes. And he was a weirdo racist eugenicist, to be clear. Quetelet was also instrumental in co-founding the school of positivist criminology, which is the belief that criminals are born, not made. As in, that people are born inherently bad and will inevitably become criminals. That's who we trusted to create the metric by which we measure our health. And I don't know, maybe we shouldn't. The BMI is a great example of how when people talk about racism and sexism being systemic, they mean that it is literally baked into every system in a way we may not even notice, because the standards for a handful of white men don't really apply to everyone, and it's wrong and systemically racist for us to expect that. For example, a large 2003 study published in JAMA found that higher BMIs tend to be more optimal for Black Americans, and in fact, for Black men, quote, obesity appeared to be associated with a slightly increased life expectancy across much of the moderate obesity range for the older age group, 60 to 70 years. This study found differences in terms of how BMI impacted longevity when they separated the data by race, age, and sex. It's important to note that the study does not answer the question of why exactly they found this difference. For instance, whether this is due to differing diet, lifestyle, or genetics. It's complicated, which is why you can't just measure people and call it a day. So, to recap, BMI as we know it was created by a racist eugenicist, does not take into consideration anyone other than white men, has caused a lot of damage, and is an almost useless tool for getting a full picture of an individual's health. It's bad science, which is probably why the American Medical Association is finally advising doctors not to use it when assessing health and obesity. It's also why, while a higher BMI can correlate with disease, it also isn't really a predictor. According to Dr. Lindo Bacon, a nutritionist based in California, people considered normal weight based on their BMI can also suffer from diseases like diabetes and heart disease, which are typically associated with excess weight. Quote, I think that this has been one of the most damaging tools in medicine today because what we know is that it's a very poor predictor of health and that, for example, there are many people that are in the overweight and obese categories that live long, disease-free lives. That brings us to the obesity epidemic, which plays off of BMI data. Starting in the 80s, the obesity epidemic is basically a blur of questionable data, a lot of mixed opinions, and a complete failure to properly address health in the country. For example, in 1999, the CDC warned of a dramatic increase in the rates of obesity from 12% in 1991 to 17.9% in 1998. Except in 1998, the federal government issued surprising new BMI metrics and adopted a new definition of obesity, which lowered the threshold overnight. So, perhaps that had something to do with it? The CDC also originally said that the obesity epidemic killed 400,000 Americans per year, but those numbers were overestimated, probably by a lot. In 2005, an epidemiologist and senior scientist at the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics published a meta-analysis looking at the year 2000 and found that they could only find a link between 100,000 deaths in obesity, 1/4 the amount previously calculated. The study also found clinically overweight people on average had a longer life expectancy than people in the normal category. So combining both the overweight and obese categories resulted in around 26,000 excess deaths per year. For perspective, almost 43,000 people died in car accidents in 2021. That's not to say we shouldn't care just because the numbers of deaths are lower than what was previously reported. And for the record, there was a backlash to this study. But despite a backlash, it was backed by the CDC as well as the recipient of a CDC Science Award. Now, I'm not here to say being overweight doesn't have health risks, nor am I going to hand wave the entire obesity epidemic. After all, to be fair, that study found that overweight people live longer because overweight people also happen to be middle and upper class people, meaning that if you have money, you can afford better healthcare. So there's a lot of variables here. And that's actually my point, that the tools we have are extremely flawed because they don't take in any variables at all. You see, the majority of obesity research is driven by the dogma of energy in, energy out, or a belief that the cause of obesity is an energy imbalance of calories consumed and calories expended. But like BMI, that's a really oversimplistic view on the matter. And in fact, there is a growing community of scientists who are actively speaking out against that idea, saying that obesity is not an energy balance disorder, but a hormonal or constitutional disorder, a dysregulation of fat storage and metabolism, a disorder of fuel partitioning. It's complicated, and much like Adolf Quetelet, I am not a scientist. But unlike Adolf, I'm also not a eugenicist, nor do I have stupid sideburns. So I support proactively looking at the situation without stigmatization. And so whether or not people gain weight because of genetics or hormones or lack of access to good food, and whether or not the obesity epidemic is actually an epidemic, what's very clear is that our search for solutions was fundamentally flawed. Because for whatever reason, we decided that obesity was a consumer choice instead of a health issue. The culture that emerged from the alleged obesity epidemic is called a weight-centered health paradigm, or WCHP. It sounds like the California Highway Patrol's body shaming department, but it's actually an approach that focuses specifically on weight and not overall health and well-being. And understanding that we live under a WCHP is key to understanding why we struggle with both obesity and eating disorders. After all, whatever your view of the obesity epidemic, it hasn't been solved, has it? Clearly, we're not doing a good job addressing it. And that's because we created a culture that looks at fatness as a catch-all problem, the singular deciding factor for health. In recent years, there has been increased criticism of this paradigm, such as this review written by public health professors Dr. Lily O'Hara and Dr. Jane Taylor. In it, they outline how the WCHP results in discrimination, how different pillars of society, such as social media and the medical field, propagate it, the real-life consequences it has on people's lives, and calls for a paradigm shift that takes into account a variety of factors and instead focuses on health and well-being. In other words, We took these very flawed tools, body mass index, obesity statistics, skewed mortality rates, and created a fundamental misunderstanding of why people are different sizes. And then we built our entire strategy around stressing the importance of weight loss. Just a single number where we decided that if that number is lower, you are automatically more healthy. And then we put the responsibility of making that number lower squarely on the individual, even if that number was never the problem in the first place. It was a system designed to not only fail, but fucking devastate the health of everyone trying to meet an often impossible standard. Kind of like capitalism. See, I'm like Cody, I can hate money too. Speaking of money and hate, we're going to talk about exactly where all of this leads after the ad break, because let me tell you, it doesn't lead to a good place. Just a little sneaky peeky for you.
You know, good sleep is like a big warm jacket made of wiggling puppies, in that both are important to have for a job interview. Yeah, sometimes the puppies run away, but that's why you need really strong but humane tape. What was I talking about? Sleep. Or more specifically, the pod cover by 8 Sleep. It works just like any fitted sheet, except the pod cover is designed to regulate your temperature throughout the night so you can get the best darn sleep of your life. Better than if you laid on a mattress made of sheep, which was one of my less successful designs. If only there were a way to use wool without also having the sheep there, but there's just not yet. Temperature is one of the main reasons we have trouble sleeping, which is why the pod cover is so neat. It also has really cool features like health tracking, so you can wake up with a personalized sleep report every morning. We love reading reports. No more asking your pillow horse for information. Go to 8sleep.com/more news and save $150 on the pod cover by 8sleep. That's the best offer you'll find, but you must visit 8sleep.com/more news for the $150 off. 8sleep currently ships within the USA, Canada, the UK, select countries in the EU, and Australia. Mate.
Hey, we are back, and Cody is still, well, he's still just laying next to the desk, possibly dead.
I'm in so much pain. Why is nobody helping me?
R.I.P. little guy. So, we talked about the myths of weight loss and fitness culture, 1,200 calories, the BS, BMI, the obesity epidemic, and how all these figures and tools led to this idea that a person's entire health boiled down to their weight. The reality is that it actually depends on a lot more than that. Some people can be larger than others and still be perfectly healthy. But even if weight is a factor in health, a lot of that might have to do with income and access to healthcare and affordable healthy options. It's a big, complex situation with no hard lines and a lot of systemic issues to address. So naturally, we as a society ignored all of that and decided that it was the fault of the individual. Bizarrely, we decided that shame was the way to go, which isn't just cruel, but illogical on several levels, especially with how we relate the concepts of weight and health to the concept of beauty. To start, there is just no natural state for attractiveness or beauty. And what I mean is that the standards of beauty and health have changed over time when it comes to weight. While doctors have been giving people the general advice not to overeat and to exercise since the Greeks, fatness has had all types of varied connotations throughout history. Some negative, but many positive. In certain societies, obesity was seen as a privilege of the upper classes and was considered beautiful, as demonstrated by the Rubenesque female nudes. And if you Google Rubenesque female nudes right now, you will see that this is very much still the case. It's all porn. It's all porn. I don't know what I expected. Anyway, beauty standards have always changed throughout time, throughout culture, throughout space, and the multiverse, and now the metaverse, I guess. If there is one thing I know, it's that beauty standards always be changing. Eyebrows themselves have gone through overwhelming amounts of fads. The unibrow, for example, was once considered beautiful and is maybe having a well-deserved comeback, but honestly, it's hard to keep track of what the we're supposed to do with our eyebrows. Do we tweeze them? Oops, not anymore. Let him be bushy. Ugh, not that bushy. Shave him off. Draw him back in. Wait, what are you doing? Have you lost it? Grow it back in. No, not like that. Vertically. Grow him vertically. Make him look cool. Okay. Perfect. You get the point. It's hilariously arbitrary. Powdered wigs, foot binding, high hairlines, that brief moment where David Copperfield was really sexy. And so it's odd that anyone would act shocked or offended at modern body positivity movements or think that there's one set standard of what beauty looks like. It seems like something a dipshit would think.
I know this is an unpopular viewpoint, but it turns out that it's not the world's job to change its standards of beauty to meet the fact that you are significantly overweight, and it is very unhealthy for you to be significantly overweight. The standards of beauty did not change enough to now encompass people who are at least 75 to 100 pounds overweight.
Thank you for the demonstration, Ben. Ben pretty much flaunts every single bad tool in his videos about this. He also claims that the standards of beauty did not change before saying literally the opposite and that skinny people are oppressed actually.
And you can see this throughout our public culture right now. People are being punished for losing weight. That's how insane our quote-unquote tolerant moral regime has become.
Anyway, that's one of the reasons that fat shaming is completely illogical. But the bigger reason is that it's also just ineffective and counterproductive. America specifically, but also most of the world, has created a sort of cruel funhouse for overweight people to navigate. At the same time as creating food that is addictive and appealing, we shame people for finding it addictive and appealing. Here's a photo taken in the US in 2007 that perfectly captures this tug of war. One side pushing for an extremely unhealthy product, while the other side blames you for wanting that product. And more than that, it implies that being overweight is a tragic failure, which it turns out is what a lot of these types of ads do. Instead of encouraging eating healthy food, a great deal of these weight loss campaigns focus on the disgust of being obese. For instance, these ads from the League Against Obesity present the idea that a kid wanting to grow up to be a fat astronaut, firefighter, or pilot is just ridiculous. That framing means their fatness is the object of ridicule. Same with these fat can't hide ads that ran in Germany. Instead of promoting the idea that healthy choices improve your life, they are saying that unhealthy choices make your life worse. They're saying, you better do this or else, which not only fat shames people, but makes healthy eating seem like a chore you have to do in order to not get fat. You might notice that this is similar to anti-tobacco ads, which use disease and death as a threat. But much like addiction, obesity isn't a choice. And so imagine if they did this with any other medical condition. Imagine if, to encourage people to get prostate checks, they put out ads shaming people with cancer. Would that feel productive? If they ran TV ads where someone dies of a disease and then everyone points and laughs at them at their funeral and then their widow bangs the priest right there on the gravestone. What about that? And because we have decades of ads framing obesity as a shameful failing of the individual, that very silly idea has leaked into everyone's perception. Make no mistake, people are discriminated against because they are seen as overweight. Despite what health expert Ben says, many people report being treated disrespectfully due to their weight, being called names and insults, being considered lazy or out of control. You can also, apparently, be fired for being fat. Amazingly, this bias is especially prevalent in medicine. A 2015 study published in the National Library of Medicine found that many healthcare providers hold strong negative attitudes and stereotypes about people with obesity, and that providers who evaluated patients who were obese were more likely to rate the encounter as a waste of time and indicated that they would spend 28% less time with the patient compared with those who evaluated normal weight patients. If fat shaming was really about being concerned for people's health, why does it seem like the results of fat shaming typically negatively impact people's health? It's like when people are upset at seeing fat people in ads for athletic gear. Like, what is it? You don't want fat people to be able to comfortably exercise? If fat shaming is all about health, then why do people get snarky and rude when fat people are leading an active lifestyle? You see how this is a fun house? How society creates this inescapable maze for overweight people filled with contradictions and ridicule? This Mad Hatter logic where you're simultaneously shamed for being overweight, advertised cheap and unhealthy food, and turned away by the doctors all at the same time? And that's probably why fat shaming not only has very real and traumatic effects, but doesn't fucking work and actually leads to more unhealthy behavior. Instead of motivating people, fat shaming just makes a person feel terrible about themselves, causing them to stress and to be less likely to take care of their health. So basically, it makes it harder for people to manage their health both physically and mentally, and does nothing in the so-called war on obesity. But let's be honest, fat shamers like Ben Shapiro probably don't really care about people's health. Not really. They just like having someone to bully in a way that makes them feel like they're helping. They get their cake and they eat it too, which, yes, I do understand is an ironic analogy in this context. And so where does it go from here? What I mean is that, as we've talked about so far, we have this society that has completely failed at addressing healthy eating and fitness. That ignores systemic problems, has created a false metric for health based solely around weight, and decided the solution was to shame obese people and put the responsibility squarely on them. So what is it? What's the end result of such a broken situation?
Ozempic is proven to lower A1C. Most people who took Ozempic reached an A1C under 7 and maintained it. And you may lose weight. Adults lost on average up to 12 pounds.
Ah, yes, Ozempic. We mentioned it earlier, remember? That's what we call foreshadowing in the biz. Ozempic is a diabetes drug, or at least that was its original purpose. The generic drug name is semaglutide, which is branded as Ozempic, Rybelsus, Wegovy, and Hingastingus, although Hingastingus is only available at pharmacies in the Smetherlands. Ozempic and its sister drug Trulicity both work by stimulating a hormone that causes your pancreas to release more insulin, and a side effect of the drug is weight loss. For that reason, the drug sort of blew up in the media, which has done a piss-poor job of representing what Ozempic actually does. Currently, it might do everything from creating a repulsion towards food to conquering addiction as we know it. This is why it's been very popular amongst celebrities, the wealthy, and people whose fathers definitely didn't own a share in an emerald mine. Also, they aren't a miracle. They are designed specifically for people who are fighting diabetes, and as a result are also dieting to reduce their carbon sugar intake. And because they are designed for that, and specifically creating more insulin that causes your stomach to digest things slower and lower blood sugar, one side effect is that it's very easy to get nauseous or poop your brains out, which is common with most diabetes drugs. So imagine if you aren't diabetic and are simply taking the drug with your regular diet, well, then food and alcohol would suddenly feel revolting. You probably don't want to drink either, and that's probably what's actually happening because all the evidence around Ozempic's superpowers are anecdotal and often from people who aren't dieting. Literally, one of the interviews says, quote, "I go to my favorite restaurant and order a steak and I take 4 bites and I don't want to finish it." And like, yeah, no shit. Or rather, lots of shit. It's messing with your stomach. It's messing with your stomach. It's not curing you of addiction. I bring this up because Ozempic is being mythologized heavily in the media, which is in turn creating a months-long shortage of the medication thanks to people scooping it up for magical weight loss. Besides creating a shortage, Ozempic has a butt ton of side effects, like the aforementioned nausea, as well as headaches, malnutrition, burps that taste like rotting eggs, surreal dreams, and others. Also, the weight loss itself eventually stops, and if you stop taking the drug, it'll stop working. People will often gain the weight back after they stop taking it, and that's because it was never intended for people who weren't also on a diet designed specifically for diabetes. I want to be very clear. If you are diabetic or pre-diabetic, Ozempic and Trulicity will help you. They will lower your blood sugar and, provided you are also lowering your carb intake and getting exercise, also help you lose weight. And if you keep to your diet, you will also keep off that weight. But if you aren't diabetic, it's just not for you, man. It's not a miracle cure. It is a drug that people need that's being misrepresented in the media. But what stands out to me about Ozempic and the conversation around it is that it really shows the desperation surrounding this perceived need for weight loss. That people are willing to risk a rainbow of side effects to inject themselves with a drug because they feel like they've run out of options. And this is where we get to the trigger warning stuff, because this equation of fat shaming combined with a complete failure to actually promote a healthy lifestyle means that for a lot of people, the only thing left is to develop an eating disorder. This is where it's all heading. This is the reason our fat shaming culture has failed everyone, to the point that in a lot of cases, eating disorders are treated like responsible diets. So, yeah, trigger warning for this, and maybe even some stuff before this. I'm sorry, this is my first time doing the whole show by myself since Cody died. I should have thought of the trigger warning part sooner. So, when most people think about eating disorders, they think about anorexia nervosa. It's typically characterized by weight loss, but clinically it's much more than that. It's extreme food restriction and or purging in a way that's harmful to the individual. There's also bulimia nervosa, which is defined by a cycle of binge eating followed by self-induced vomiting. These are both debilitating conditions that have devastating physical and mental effects. But there are many other types of eating disorders out there that slip under the radar, like orthorexia, which masquerades as being healthy but is actually a destructive condition in which a person obsesses about every single thing they put in their bodies and makes up for eating with exercise. But since exercise and eating healthy is fine and often encouraged when not done in excess, it's easy to mistake an unhealthy obsession with health as simply being responsible and disciplined. For this reason, people don't realize how common eating disorders really are. Approximately 24 to 28 million people in the United States suffer from an eating disorder, around 9% of the U.S. population, according to the National Association of Anorexia Nervosa and Associated Disorders. Moreover, eating disorders are among the deadliest mental illnesses, second only to opioid addiction, resulting in over 10,000 deaths each year. For context, that's over 2 times the number of people who die by drowning per year in the U.S. But that doesn't count all the various long-term risks that come from punishing your body. Food intolerances, IBD, anxiety, injuries from over-exercising, and not to mention the effects it can have on your work and relationships. Eating disorders can have disproportionate effects on people who are marginalized, like BIPOC, who are less likely to have their eating disorders taken seriously by doctors and more likely to go for longer periods without being diagnosed. Eating disorders also particularly affect gender and sexual minorities. Gay and bisexual men and boys have higher rates of disordered eating, and transgender college students are 4 times more likely to have an eating disorder than their cisgender peers. Over 30% of trans people say that attempts to change their bodies without the help of hormones has led to eating disorders. Unfortunately, people often view eating disorders as primarily a feminine problem, so much so that it has become a stereotype. But while it's true that eating disorders commonly affect women, people identifying as male account for 1 in 3 diagnosed eating disorders, and they're likely to be overlooked due to the stereotype of this being a girl problem. And when we live in a culture where girl problems are seen as frivolous, not only does this negatively impact feminine people, but masculine people who are afraid of being punished for having a girly problem. It's no surprise then that researchers have found that men are underdiagnosed and undertreated for their eating disorders. It's almost like if we started to take so-called chick problems more seriously, we'd actually discover they aren't exclusively chick problems and everyone in society might benefit. For men, this problem is often rebranded completely. Similar to Thinstagram, which gears towards young girls, bro science is targeted at boys and young men that disguises unhealthy eating habits or weird body expectations behind nutrition culture, weightlifting, and biohacking. Biohacking is a fad that came out of Silicon Valley. Tech dudes try to hack their own biology to become more efficient and defy age. But most of the habits they endorse can easily become eating disorders. The way that silicon elites describe the highs from fasting are very similar to the highs that eating disorder sufferers characterize. It's just an eating disorder, but rebranded like one of those dude wipe products you see. Take, for example, former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, who famously revealed he only eats one meal a day consisting of lean protein and vegetables, and he sometimes fasts for the entire weekend. He described his experience saying, "The first time I did it, like day 3, I felt like I was hallucinating. It was a weird state to be in. And the experience I had was when I was fasting for much longer, how time really slowed down." That sounds like you're literally starving your brain, my man. But since he is, in fact, a man, most people don't think twice about what he's saying.
Be right back.
Sounds like you're literally starving your brain, my man. But since he is, in fact, a man, most people don't think twice about what he's saying. He is celebrated for his self-control and given a platform to share his weird fasting rules, legitimizing it as something scientific and healthy. Because men don't get eating disorders, just like men don't experience emotions, and men only like drinks that taste like carbonated gasoline. There's actually a lot of misinformation about eating disorders, one of the biggest being that it's just a chick thing. And as I keep saying, it also is really easy to confuse a healthy lifestyle with a compulsion. For example, here's David Beckham saying that his wife, Victoria Beckham, has basically eaten the same thing for the last 30 years.
When I'm eating something great, I want everyone to try it, you know, and that's, unfortunately, I'm married to someone that has eaten the same thing for the last 25 years. Since I've met Victoria, she only eats, you know, grilled fish, steamed vegetables. She'll very rarely deviate away from there. The only time that she's ever probably shared something that's been on my plate was actually when she was pregnant with Harper.
Do you remember
and
what
it was the most amazing thing. It was one of my favourite evenings. I can't remember what it was, but I know that she's not eaten it since.
Look, there's nothing wrong with steamed vegetables and grilled fish, and I'm not her doctor, and they won't even let me near their property, but absent some serious medical reason to have such a restrictive diet, this would likely be considered disordered eating. It's not really a charming story, it's pretty concerning. On the subject of sports, both men and women athletes not only struggle with eating disorders, but are often encouraged to have them. Nearly a third of boys report that they want to gain weight, and about 10% of men are taking supplements or steroids to bulk up. But it's not just an obsession with getting more muscular. Weight loss is also a problem among men. Take, for example, wrestlers and mixed martial artists who often purge to make weight classes. It turns out that can shockingly lead to eating disorders. In fact, the National Eating Disorders Association estimates that 33% of male athletes in athletic sports such as bodybuilding, gymnastics, swimming, and weight class sports like wrestling and rowing are affected by eating disorders. This is because many sports like dancing, running, rock climbing emphasize a leaner and lighter physique. That mentality is built into the guidelines of wrestling, as athletes need to make a certain weight class to place themselves in the most competitive position during tournaments. This pressure to lose weight can have severe long-term health effects, like Ryan DeBlock, a high school wrestler who nearly starved himself to death.
His health declined so severely that he even had to have life-altering surgery.
A lot of gastric problems. I had ulcers in my stomach and my small intestine. I had to get my gallbladder removed. So the gallbladder helps to digest fat, but I wasn't eating enough fat, or really any fat at all. And so it just crystallized because all the liquids and stuff that are coming out of it just solidified. So I had to get that removed.
In that same clip, Ryan also talks about how he was trained to dehydrate himself so that he could drop weight classes quickly, and that he had no idea what was actually going on. He didn't think he had an eating disorder because that wasn't something that happened to men, and he certainly didn't have someone to talk to about it. Instead, he was celebrated for losing weight fast. I cannot stress enough how common this is. Let's take competitive cyclist Guy East, who was throwing up multiple times a week to stay light. His coaches would pinch his body, telling him that he was too fat. And pretty soon he was killing himself to lose weight.
I just remember looking into the mirror every morning and saying, I need to lose weight. I'm too fat, you know, too fat, I'm too fat, I'm too fat. I would eat like 5,000 calories in the morning. I say, okay, now I have to go ride for 5 hours. And if I don't, well, I'm gonna gain weight. Or I could throw up.
How often were you throwing up after eating?
A couple times a week, you know, sometimes multiple times a day.
You didn't tell anybody?
Who are you gonna talk to about it?
Seriously, who was he gonna talk to about it? The people who he was getting advice from were the people teaching self-harming behaviors. You know what pinching someone's stomach and telling them they need to lose weight is? It's called fat shaming. And it doesn't just happen on tabloid covers to early 2000s pop stars. In athletics, it's seen as part of the profession. Body shaming has been shown to be systemic in both college and professional sports. But because professional athletes are seen as the pinnacle of health, we don't question whether they are truly healthy, both physically and mentally. Only if they're physically injured, like bones sticking out, can we actually see the toll that sports can take on people's bodies. And speaking of invisible problems, I haven't even mentioned the biggest eating disorder out there, and that is binge eating. Binge eating is defined as recurrent episodes of eating large quantities of food, often to the point of discomfort, and experiencing shame, distress, or guilt afterwards, and not regularly using unhealthy compensatory measures, e.g., purging. It is the most common eating disorder in the United States. Did you catch that last bit? I'm sure you did. It was on the screen and I read it out loud. Despite our cultural preconceived notions of what an eating disorder even is, binge eating is the most common ED in the United States. And it's the one that is centered around guilt and shame when it comes to food. Notably, shame and guilt are more likely to result in symptoms of an eating disorder. And researchers have found a correlation between the reduction of shame and guilt and lessening of the symptoms of an eating disorder. Shame and guilt are so tied up in eating disorders, not just in terms of causing them or worsening them, but in even being able to talk openly about having an eating disorder. There are often many assumptions about what kind of person has or has had an eating disorder, what they look like, or even what it says about their personality. So, I don't know. Can we stop? While we're not to blame for the problem, we can't actually be the solution, or at least start pushing the needle in the right direction. We can change our relationship to our bodies. We can change how we treat ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, how we talk about our bodies in front of children, how we talk about our bodies in front of each other, how we talk about other people's bodies. You know what, actually, can we just stop commenting on people's bodies at all? It's none of your business. And we have no idea what someone is going through. You might think that an innocuous, did you lose weight? You look great, is a nice, thoughtful thing to say, but you don't know. Oftentimes when people rapidly lose weight, it's either because they're sick or went through something really hard and are struggling in some way. All of this is important. All of it matters. For example, a little over a year ago, I went through an extremely traumatic period and I lost a lot of weight. And I started taking Prozac, which took away my appetite, causing me to lose more weight. I was sick, and my hair was falling out, and I was fainting on walks. And yet, so many people would say, wow, you look incredible, which I found very triggering because, wait, okay, sorry. Well, this is going to get a little bit real, so I'm just, you know what? I'm going to make a fun little segment out of it.
Katie gets real.
It's very inappropriate. Thank you. So I probably should come out, say point blank that I have struggled with various versions of an eating disorder, disordered eating and body dysmorphia since I was very young. I used to joke about being sent to fat camp by my doctor at the age of 9. But as I got older, I realized just how traumatic that experience was for me and for the countless other kids who got swept up in the obesity epidemic hysteria of the 90s. To be taught from such a young age that our bodies are bad, that we weren't allowed to take up space, that we had to be smaller. If you listen to our podcast, Even More News, you may have heard me talk around this, but I haven't publicly unpacked it because it's scary. I didn't want to be seen as a stereotype. I didn't want people to be studying my body or judging me. I debated for a long time if I even wanted to do this episode because I'm very, very aware that I am sitting here as a thin-bodied white woman, and that is a place of extreme privilege. While I have struggled under the burden of an eating disorder, and yes, my life has been negatively affected living under a weight-centric health paradigm, I do not experience the weight of stigmatization that larger bodies experience daily. But this isn't to say that I haven't also dealt with these issues, and I do think it's important for us to share our stories. The only reason I was ever able to face the reality of my disorder was because a dear friend shared with me that she had an eating disorder. When she described what she went through, I recognized myself, and I felt empowered to seek help. I began a journey towards peace, and if you are struggling, I want that for you too, very much. This has been
Katie gets real.
Ooh, I'm so mad about that title. We could have used a different title. Title monkey. We're cool, but it was fucked up. While it might surprise you to hear that I have also struggled with these issues, the entire point is that it shouldn't, because these disorders don't look like anything, and we've spent years completely skewing what it actually looks like to be healthy and unhealthy, using bullshit metrics and normalizing disordered behavior because everyone decided that the only thing that mattered was a number on a scale. And it's really screwed us up in a fundamental way because, yeah, for a lot of people, weight does come with health complications, but for other people, it doesn't. And at the end of the day, healthiness doesn't look like anything specific, nor is it often in the control of the individuals, but more likely genetics or addiction or your fucking zip code. And it's wild that we've realized this with so many other systemic issues, but still act like bootstraps pulling conservatives when it comes to weight and health. Seriously, it's ridiculous. Like, okay, watch. Hey, Cody! Hey, Cody, come over here. I'll give you weed if you come over here.
What kind of weed?
So what if I turned to Cody and I said, hey, brokey arms, why don't you try hitting the ER, make your bones less broken? No one's gonna wanna look at your crunched up arms.
Well, now I feel self-conscious about how fragmented my bones are.
Right. And is that making you feel more motivated to heal your arms?
No, but it does make me want to buy products to make my arms look less broken and more fuckable.
Exactly. Thank you. Oh, I lied about the weed. You can leave. You can leave. Okay. Ah! You see how silly that is? And so imagine that, but on a worldwide scale. That's how we're handling dietary and fitness health for way too long. Imagine social media groups dedicated to shaming people for broken bones. I mean, that's actually a real thing because people are weird, but you get what I'm saying. Imagine that kind of nonsense on television and movies and ads baked into our culture. Imagine treating other pandemic issues like long COVID like a personal failing, or pushing people with illnesses to develop disorders to cure themselves. Or, very important, imagine treating something like it's a health failing when it isn't actually one, which is also the case with weight. Imagine being looked at for a second by a stranger or even a friend or a doctor, and that person deciding, based on a glance, that you are unhealthy and it is your fault. It's so silly and archaic, and it's embarrassing, and it's hurting everyone, especially Cody. But I needed to make a point, even if I had to pay Leslie Bibb to arrange it.
Wait, what?
Huh? Oh, Cody, no, you should really lie down. Just take a rest, little guy. Anyway, great episode, everyone. We did it. I mean, no one seems to care that she lost half a day of skiing. Half a day! Here we are, we've arrived at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. You go.
Me go. Like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the channel the video's on.
Correct. And if you like podcasts, well, boy, do we have a podcast for you to also listen to. It's called Even More News. You can find it. You can also find the audio from this show in that podcast feed. Promise you it'll make sense once you go and subscribe. Cody.
Go and subscribe. Check out our patreon.com / some more news. And merchandise at a merchandise store.
Sounded like you said merch and dice, which we don't have, but should have.
Yeah, we should.
Dice in the future. Like and subscribe.
Subscribe.
Last week, a transcript of the short message communications between the Ocean Gate Titan submarine and his ocean surface support vessel, Polar Prince, was released by several TikTokers and also a Pakistani educational YouTube channel. Now, we can't confirm its authenticity, and the internet seems to be divided. Some people think it's authentic, some people think it's fake because the regular news hasn't mentioned it yet. So let's do a deep dive on this transcript and see what it tells us, and we'll decide whether this is authentic or not. Now, you guys know me as an engineer. When I do these types of engineering failure analysis for you, I like to base it on, hard facts, evidence, photographs, engineering reports, contracts, whatever, building permits. I'm going to give it just a little indulgence and we'll see, and I'll tell you why. And the critics are going to come in here and say, you shouldn't be guessing and telling people this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Don't tell me that both you and me haven't, at some point here, put ourselves inside that sub and tried to figure out what was going on. Let our imaginations run wild. This transcript comes the closest to the scenarios that I think actually happened, and it seems to line up with the timestamps and everything. Let's take a look and let's see. And you let us know in the comments what you think after seeing this. So let's start at the beginning of the transcript. And remember, this is an unconfirmed transcript, so I'm going to keep telling you this throughout this video. In green will be the Polar Prince, which is the top, and the sub will be in yellow. So our very first timestamp is at 7:52, and the top says clear for descent, enjoy the ride. The sub says descending now, launch sequence complete, ready, and the top says all clear, and then they say proceedings. So at 8:01 a.m., the OceanGate Titan submarine began its descent downward towards the Titanic shipwreck. And then the top side said, enjoyed the dive, gentlemen. So next here at 8:19, about 20 minutes later, the top side says, you're 15 minutes into the dive, current depth. System check, please. And the sub reports back a minute or so later, system check complete, all in order, all lights are green, we are 756 proceeding. And now this is where I added my note here that I think they're going too fast, and we'll talk about that in a second. This could either mean that they're at 756 meters or that they are at 75.6 meters, and I doubt they're at 75.6. That would be way too shallow for the amount of time they've been on the water. Anyway, the top side says, thank you, proceed, and then about 34 minutes into the trip, the top side says, you're 30 minutes in, update please. And 8:34, again, this is almost a minute later, the sub says, all systems are functioning normally. We're in good shape, continuing our descent as planned. So it looks like everything's going fine. Everybody's happy. But let me point something out to you here at this point. This is the Titanic is at 3,800 meters. And this is why I think they're going too fast. The descent time is 2.5 hours to get down there. That's what James Cameron has done many times. And this is what it says on OceanGate's website. So at that rate, you're doing 3,800 meters divided by 2.5 hours, which means you're going at 1,520 meters per hour. And if you put that into minutes now, you divide that by 60, your average speed here should be 25.33 meters per minute. So just keep that speed in mind. That's how fast they should be going. So when I take that last timestamp where they checked in and said that they were at 756, here's what Titan's depth should be at that point in time. It should be 20 minutes in, right here, times 25 meters per minute, which gives you 532 meters. That should be their depth. Right now, they're at 756 meters, and they should not be that deep. So I am concluding at this point that the Titan sub is descending too fast. This is implying that this is the authentic transcript. Now, if this was fake and somebody would just made up numbers, then they might have been wrong and didn't do their math right, like I did right here. Okay, so moving on the transcript, we're now 36 minutes into the trip, and the top says, superb, proceed. And at 8:49, they say, over the 45-minute mark, current depth, and confirm status. Now the sub replies back about 2 minutes later here. The sub depth is at 1934, all systems stable, and the descent is continuing as planned. Happy crew. And then the top side says, excellent. And then about almost 10 minutes later, they say you're at the hour mark, and the submarine says all is smooth in sailing here. And the sub says all is smooth sailing here. And what I want to look at here is this 1934 depth. Let's do a little math check on it. So here it is again, just repeated for you, the timestamp and the 1934 depth. Titan's depth should be, at this point in time, 51 minutes times 25.33 meters per minute. 1,292 meters is where they should be. Where are they? They're at 1934 meters, so they're descending too fast, again, at this particular point in time, based on my estimate. And so now here at 9:15, about 15 minutes later, it says you are at 75 minutes depth. Do you need to adjust velocity? And the sub reports back, all under control at 2960. No adjustments needed. We're enjoying the ride. And the top says understood. So now let's analyze these numbers. So when I look at these numbers here it is repeated for you, the 2960. The Titan's depth should be, we're we're at 77 minutes times 9:28 a.m. with this message on the timestamp. The sub says, we're noting an alarm from the RTM. And then about 20 seconds later, they type in reducing velocity, descent depth is at 3433 right now. So let's go take a look just real quickly at this and check this depth. And the Titan's depth should be, at this point, we're 88 minutes in, so it should be 88 minutes times 25.33 meters, which is 2229 meters. That should be how deep they are. But instead, they're at 3433 meters. They're 1,200 meters deeper than expected based on all of the normal estimates, based on my math. And so now, the OceanGate Titan sub is an hour early. They're 400 meters from the Titanic shipwreck site. And again, I'm telling you that the sub is descending too fast. Now, I showed you this in my previous video here on the Titan submarine disaster. This is the scale and the distance that they probably were from the Titanic, including how far off to the side, because they found them about 500 or 600 yards away, I believe. So they probably got around to this point. Now, they would not have been able to see this because it's pitch dark down there, and you can only see the Titanic once you're right up close to it and you turn your big bright lights on. They ride down in the dark, but this is the vantage point of where they were sitting when they had to turn around and go back up. They were this close. For those of you not familiar, RTM stands for Real-Time Monitoring System. Now, OceanGate had boasted about this on Instagram a few years ago, about how the system would detect their hull defects with incredible accuracy and well before the safety of the crew is threatened. And here's their post on Instagram right here, and it says, this real-time monitoring system samples sound waves through the hull many times per second, providing incredible accuracy and allowing us to assess the health of the hull during the dive. It says right here, which is ironic, that our extensive testing and that of many researchers over the last 20 years has shown that increased acoustic activity always occurs well before the structure fails. I guess that wasn't the case here in this particular disaster. What a shame. So anyway, now I've changed everything from the sub to be red since they are in crisis mode. So now the top says, understood. Do you need to ascend? So the sub replies back with no change with thrust. The rate of descent is increasing at 35 now. Going to release the ballast now. And the top says, yes, agree, release the ballast. And the sub says, no improvement. Preparing to jettison the frame. So something's happening. They've got too much weight apparently, and it's not slowing them down. So now they have to ditch this, I believe, is what they were getting rid of, is the frame. And the top says affirmative, update when able, RTM indicator status. So they're asking them again to tell them what that real-time monitoring system is telling them. And about almost 3 minutes later, the sub replies back with, the frame jettisoned, multiple attempts needed, but starting the ascent now. So it looks like they're going up now. And apparently from other reports that we've seen, they have to line everybody up on one side of the submersible, which is strange, to drop the ballast weights. I don't know if they had to do the same thing here for this too, but it looked like something wasn't going right at first, and it took them several tries. So now the top side here is surprised, and they write, what? Multiple attempts? What is your status? RTM indicators in depth. They didn't get an answer, and a minute later, the top side comes back again. It says, update, please, when able. And then finally, here's the really ominous text from the sub. It says, crackling sound at aft. And that means back in the back side of the sub over here, is where they heard some type of crackling. They're not really sure where. It's in the aft, but remember, they're sitting in here, and there's probably a walled-off section in here that has all the equipment that they can't see because it's behind the wall, and so who knows what was going on back in there. And then the top side replies back with, can you identify the source, ? And RTM indicators. So this is probably the third or fourth time they've asked them to give the RTM indicators, and the sub hasn't given that yet. Now the sub just writes neg. So really short, tersely worded. Same with back up here at this one. You'll notice they've ditched a lot of the punctuation. So that says to me that they're in some type of panic mode, and they're just trying to do things as fast as they can. They're just typing with few words as possible now. And then again, the top side asks for the RTM status about 4 minutes later, after numerous attempts, as you can see, asking them. And the sub finally replies back 2 minutes later, trying to run diagnostics, ascending now, but very slow. Sounds have subsided. Global RTM alert active, all red. Now, when they say all red, I don't know how many LEDs they have. Do they have one for every sensor? He supposedly has at least, I thought I read a report somewhere that there was like 20 sensors. Does that mean there's 20 LED lights, we don't know. This does not sound good, especially where it says the sounds have subsided. You think, oh, that sounds like good news. But this, to me, global RTM alert active, all red. So that doesn't sound good. I would be just shaking in my boots at this point. Okay, so now the top side replies back with understood. Any codes? Question mark. Depth, ascent rate, and they didn't get an answer back, so they say updates when able, please. Then finally, the sub replies back and says slow ascent in progress. Quarter predicted, unclear why rate is small, no indicator, and they're at 3476. So as we recall, they got as low as 35. Okay, so pay attention to this number because here they are at 3476, and remember, so they were at 3,500 meters before they started the ascent. So they've only gone, looks like about 24 or so meters here. And now at 9:44, the top comes back here and it says, we're talking it over with the engineer, stand by. So they're trying to figure out why the rate of ascent is too small going up, and they're probably trying to figure out what's going on with these thrusters here. And so now at 9:45:11, the top says depth and status, please. They want to know what's going on. What's the wattage on the upwards thrust? And the sub replies back here at 9:46:37, reading red on the A power bus. I switched to B at 3457 meters and more sounds aft. So this is sounding really bad. So they're hearing the sounds again. The A power bus has already gone out, which means the battery was probably compromised or something there. So they switched over to the backup, which is B, as you see down here. So here's what is alarming to me. Look at their depth right here. 3457 meters. About 3 minutes ago, they were up here at 3476 meters. So the Ocean Gate Titan submarine, by this point in time, has only gone about 20 meters in 3 minutes. That's 60 feet in 3 minutes. That's way slow. So something was definitely going on. Looks like they were desperately losing power. Their power systems were failing. I am wondering if somehow water leaked into the back of the... Now, we know that a lot of experts will tell us, okay, if a little, even a pinhole of water gets in there, it's going to send like a laser beam of water in there that'll slice your arm off, which is true. But these guys are sitting in here, and it may have started real small in there in the back as maybe a void, maybe enough voids or stress on the carbon fiber would allow just enough water to start collecting in the back end there and maybe weigh things down. We don't know. So let us know down in the comments below what you think about that. So now at 9:47, the top says understood, continue ascent, talking to Carlos about the power bus situation right now. And then they come back about a minute later and they say, we're activating recovering procedures. Carlos is requesting wattage output from bus B. Status update, please. Velocity of ascent. And then a minute later, they say, top, we're not receiving you. Update, please. And then another minute after that, they say status and depth report. So notice who's doing all of the communication here. This is all in green. This is the top side. This is the Polar Prince doing all of the talking. So this is why I think by now the sub has already imploded. So when do you think it imploded? Well, if we go back to here, look at this timestamp. 9:46:37 was their last transmitted message up to the boat. Not even a minute later, they're not getting a response. So I'm going to call it at 9:47 that it probably happened right before these guys sent this message. That would be probably a reasonable time to expect that that's when it happened. And remember, all the news reports say that they lost contact at about 9:45 in the morning. So this is not too far off. The last message from the Titan submarine to the boat would be this. If this is the original an authentic transcript, and it says right here, reading red on the A power bus, I switched to B at 3457 meters, more sounds aft. And well, the rest is history. We know what happened there. So if we look here, according to these timestamps, the duration of the Titan sub-disaster, it started at 9:28:16, and I called it at 9:47. So it looks like the crew had nearly 19 minutes where they were in panic mode and managing the emergency. So this is totally scary. I have run this scenario through my brain just numerous times since day one, and I kept trying to put myself in that sub and going, what do you think they were going through? What would I be feeling? What would I be seeing? And it's just so scary to know that these guys spent 20 minutes in fear of their lives. And you can bet that Stockton Rush was probably trying to calm them down, going, hey, listen, guys, no, I've got the patent on this system here. It gives us hours of notice. We'll have plenty of time to get this submersible back up to the surface, and we'll be having drinks in no time. But of course it didn't turn out that way. Everybody on the internet is arguing over whether this is an authentic transcript or not. And some are saying, well, this wasn't released officially, so this is probably fake news. How do we know this is real? How could anybody have gotten their hands on it? Well, remember, the submersible community is a very tight-knit community, man. And so somebody could have sent a copy to James Cameron. He said he knew the day after that something was wrong. He knew that they had dropped ballast. He knew they were at 3,500 meters. How did he know? Somebody probably sent him a copy of the transcript. Take a look at this. Tell us what you think. Robert McCallum, somebody might have sent it to him as well to look at. There was a lot of people working on that boat, and they could have sent it to friends and advisors to have them take a look at it and get their opinion as well. So it doesn't take long for stuff to start circulating around. You just never know. But we'll never know for sure until the officials release the transcript later on. And also make sure you binge watch the other videos that I've uploaded here on the Titanic disaster. And make sure you check out some of our other disaster videos. And also on this channel, we cover tours of the hardware stores like Home Depot, Lowe's, and even Costco, showing you what the latest, greatest big deals are there. So thank you so much for joining us today, folks, and we'll see all of you on the next one. We have plenty more to come.
Wednesday evening, like all good evangelicals, had a personal conversion experience at the ripe old age of 5. I accepted Jesus into my heart, and all this stuff, it does completely shipwreck any of that old conviction about the earth being 6,000 years old and the Bible being literally true in the plain sense. At the time, I remember seeing like a demon or something in a bonfire. And the plan was always to go back to church. It messed me up, I think, emotionally, not in the super rebellious way. I didn't turn to drugs or booze or end up on the streets or anything like that. I was just an angry kid. She just came up to me and said, "You know what? I don't think I believe this stuff anymore." Oh, thank God. Hey, guess what? Me neither.
Sign up today for the Real Ancient Israelite Religions with Dr. Kip Davis.
Dr. Kip Davis, I'm excited about this show we're going to be recording today. I have never seen you actually give a formal testimony of your story. I'm looking forward to hearing where you come from, what you believed, where you were at, your journey into what you learned, what you have become, and how that has impacted you with your faith and where you are today. Yeah. So with that being said, I'm going to hand the mic over to you, and I'm curious to know.
Okay. So, I'm a Canadian. I grew up an evangelical. I would say my family upbringing was like very seriously evangelical. We went to church twice every Sunday, and we went every Wednesday evening, like all good evangelicals. Had a personal conversion experience at the ripe old age of 5. I accepted Jesus into my heart. I had a really, really very good, very happy childhood. It was fun being a kid. I had lots of friends at church, so church was never of course, I hated sitting in like the services, right? But I never had, and I never really had bad feelings or bad thoughts about it. Didn't bore me, I think. I will say, however, Sunday evenings made me a little bit resentful because in the 80s, every Sunday evening at 6 was the Magical World of Disney on TV, and we got to see the first 5 minutes of every episode, and then we had to go, and we never got to see it. And of course, it's before VCRs and so that sucked. That sucked. So I was baptized, I think when I was, as soon as I was able, I was baptized. And there was there was an age limit in my church. I think if I remember correctly, you had to be 9 or 10 years old before you got baptized. Um, I famously though at my church when I was 6 or 7 years old, we had like a Sunday service, and then we had a potluck, and all the kids are like running around like maniacs around the church, and it was a big church too, right? Running around like maniacs in the church, and they had a baptism planned following the potluck, so there's like a big baptismal font, like a big pool, right at the front of the church. And I, um, being the precocious young lad that I was 6. I was like, I was there at the baptismal tank, and there was like a centimeter of water, like a half an inch of water, like on that first step into the tank, and I was being a bit of a smartass and thinking, oh yeah, I'm just gonna step down, you know, into the onto this first step. I don't know what I was doing, but I slipped and I fell like right into the baptismal font with all my clothes on. And my family and everybody used to joke that I got baptized twice, but but it was, yeah, it was a happy child. It was a good childhood. Things kind of fell apart for me in high school. My parents got separated and divorced when I was 16 years old, which is something that did not happen in my church, in my Christian world. Um, it messed me up, I think, emotionally, but not in the super rebellious way. I didn't, turn to drugs or booze or end up on the streets or anything like that. I was just an angry kid. I lived with my dad, and he bought me, or he bought this book, and he read this book, and then he gave it to me to read. Maybe you've heard of this book. It's called "He Came to Set the Captives Free" by Rebecca Brown. You heard of that one?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
So you've heard of Jack T. Chick publications, Chick Tracts?
Yes. Marianne also
Right.
read that
So, I mean,
book.
they are classified as hate speech by the Southern Poverty Law Center in the United States. Like he is out there. But he was the publisher of this book, and this book purports to have been it's written by a medical doctor, and actually says on the cover, Rebecca Brown, MD. So, but this isn't a book about medicine, and it's not a book about being a doctor. It's about, having encounters with demons and with Satan, and rescuing people out of like a satanic uh human sacrificing cabal living in somewhere in Ohio. It was crazy stuff, but I bought it. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. This was in the the late '80s, early '90s, right at the height of the Satanic Panic, and I was all in on this, and it was kind of at that time I just I started having like visionary experiences. I started having encounters, which seems like spiritual encounters, but like real life kind of spiritual encounters that I interpreted as seeing like angels, in the street on my way home from work or on my way to work. Just really weird. There was a period where I'm pretty sure at the time I remember seeing like a demon or something in a bonfire, like, so this I mean I was messed up emotionally. I was messed up, but I think what this did is it sort of pushed me into the direction of focus on my faith, on my beliefs. I really, really, I was always a bit of a Bible nerd. Growing up, I had a picture Bible. It was like my favorite. My parents also bought this. They got this, like, it's a set of 80 cassette tapes, called The Bible in Drama, and it literally is like a radio drama, a radio dramatization of the entire Bible. It was pretty awesome. But I listened to these things over and over and over again. So I had a deep love from the beginning of the Bible. And like with all this stuff that was happening to me emotionally, spiritually, I think it really pushed me to just dig deep and to get serious about it. And when I graduated from high school, I went to like a discipleship school overseas. I spent a year in New Zealand there, and it was while I was there that I felt really um, convicted, commissioned to go into some sort of professional ministry, to become a pastor, a minister of the gospel. I got married, um, and then I started Bible school. The first Bible school I attended was far too warm and fuzzy for my tastes. I got in with a crowd of these James White kind of Calvinist Reformed theologian types, and of course, I was already kind of an angry person, and this just made me more angry, right? So, um, but as I said, the college that I was attending was way too warm and fuzzy for me, so I transferred out, and my wife and I packed up our stuff. I was in Calgary, Alberta, my hometown at the time. Go Flames! Um, and we moved across the mountains just outside of Vancouver to attend what at the time was called Northwest Baptist Theological College and Seminary. Much more closely aligned to my angry James Whitey and Reformed theological beliefs. But the college at the time was located on the campus of Trinity Western University, which is an evangelical Christian university, but it is a proper university. It's an actual school, and there are very good people doing good, serious academic work there. And it was while I was at Trinity that I was introduced to real academic biblical studies. One of the things that my college didn't offer was language classes. So I was very excited right away going to Northwest Baptist to take language classes. And the way it worked at Northwest, being on the same campus as Trinity, is a lot of the courses that they offered were actually cross-listed. And so you'd actually go and attend a university course. So, and this is what my language courses were offered through Trinity Western University. So my very first teacher, my very first Greek teacher, was Marty G. Abeg, who the great Marty G. Abeg, Dead Sea Scroll scholar. He was also brand new at Trinity when I started, and he was brought on campus by Craig A. Evans, both him and Peter W. Flint, that same year, to start the Dead Sea Scrolls Institute and to start a new graduate program at Trinity with a special focus on Dead Sea Scrolls. So I'll be honest with you. I knew nothing, almost nothing about the Dead Sea Scrolls before I got to Trinity. And then I really, really liked Marty right away, and it started to make me interested. And I eventually transferred out of the college into the university, abandoned the thought that I would ever become a pastor, in large part because I wasn't particularly fond of people. it's a bad mix if you don't like people and you're, a pastor. So I shifted, and I was good at the languages. I took Greek and I took Hebrew before I even got to my 4th year of undergraduate. I already had 2 years of Hebrew, 2 years of Greek, and a year of Syriac, which was a lot for an undergraduate. So I really liked it, and I was good at it. So I decided, you know what, maybe I can become a Bible professor, and that's sort of where it started. Very early on, while I had enrolled in this in this especially James Whiting Reformed Theological College, very, very strictly conservative. Pretty quickly, I think within a year or two after I started, I was no longer a conservative Christian. I had to I after transferring into the university, I had to take courses in biology, and I had to take courses in philosophy and in psychology, and all this stuff. It does completely shipwrecked any of that old conviction about the earth being 6,000 years old, and the Bible being literally true in the plain sense, and I pretty quickly became a fairly liberal, progressive Christian. Certainly before I graduated, from university. But I went straight into grad school, and I did, and that's really where I started to focus in earnest on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I did a thesis focused on the a particular manuscript from the Dead Sea Scrolls, 4Q382, the Papyrus Paraphrase of Kings, which is an ugly son of a bitch. It is 152 papyrus fragments that look terrible. but this is what I did. I went to grad school. When I finished grad school, I pushed on and I entered a PhD program at the University of Manchester. Still, still very much very committed to Jesus, very committed to the faith, but more in like a Randall Rouser kind of a way, and very happy too with this whole arrangement. My wife and I, my wife and I at the time, right around when I started my PhD, we had been married already for, I think, over 10 years. We didn't have kids yet. There was some question about whether or not we would even be able to have kids. So we had sort of decided early on that we would, we would always adopt at least one kid. Didn't have any of our own at that point, but decided, we need to start a family, and it was difficult for us. We made the decision right around the time I started my PhD that we would adopt. And so we adopted, and literally right I got accepted into the PhD program at the University of Manchester, and right around that time we had adopted my oldest son, Jaden. He was 4 years old, going on 5 at the time. He is now 23, going on 24. But he was a kid who grew up in the foster system. He had 8 placements. He had already had a disrupted adoption. He had serious attachment issues. And the adoption workers really liked Lisa and me from the outset, just because I think we're pretty chill. We're pretty easygoing people, and as people who were like this, but also didn't have any of our own kids in the first place, like hadn't born children, and maybe didn't have any expectation of having biological children in the future. I think we were able to parent this little boy with these attachment difficulties. But wow, did that ever do a number on many of my thoughts and beliefs about who God is? You know, being faced with and recognizing that there's biochemical changes that can affect a person's entire life, just on the basis of their genetic material, and also on the basis, socially speaking, of like their inability to properly attach to a mother. It really, I don't want to get into a lot of the specifics, but it really had me it really challenged my thinking about about things like the human nature, sin, these sorts of concepts that we grow up with as as part of our being as humans, but also something that was correctable. We all have this deep understanding of right and wrong and stuff. Well, my son didn't have it, right? And it was difficult to explain that, or to confront that from this perspective. So that did a number on us. I went through the PhD program. We adopted 2 more kids while I was in the PhD program, and also out of the foster system, and also with their own issues. Like one of my sons has crippling anxiety, to the extent that so he was able to go to Sunday school, but would not set foot inside the auditorium, the sanctuary of the church, because he was so terrified. Terrified of hell, terrified of dying, terrified of heaven, which, for me, in my upbringing, was just kind of like, I don't get that. I don't understand. But seeing it, I'm just like, man, like it it forced me to recalculate so much of my faith, that by the time I finished my PhD, I was a Christian out of necessity. I would tell people, I'm like, my focus is the historical, critical study of the Bible, and through the Dead Sea Scrolls. But I literally have to take off my scholar's hat at the end of the day and go and put on my church hat, just to survive in church, because so much of this stuff started to it didn't make rational sense anymore. So in order to continue to believe, and I deeply wanted to continue to believe, I had a wonderful Christian life. I cherished it. I loved it. It was very fulfilling, very rewarding. So I fought like a dog to make sure that I would stay in the faith. But over time, I just, when I finally came out to my mom that I no longer believed that I was, an atheist, and she, when she pressed me for how or why this happened, the only thing I could tell her was that I just stopped believing. I just could no longer believe the things that seemed incredulous to me. And I could not force myself to believe things that seemed incredulous to me. I'm like, you either believe this or you don't believe it. You can't pretend. I'm like, I feel like I had been pretending for a long time and I just couldn't pretend anymore. So I had a position in Norway shortly after I finished my PhD, working on scroll fragments from a private collection there, the Skoyen collection. I was also involved in the publication project for the re-edition of the Cave One manuscripts, which was supposed to come out in Dead Sea Scrolls editions from Brill. So we went over there, packed up the whole family and moved the whole family to Norway in 2012 to take this position. And while we were there, the language barrier more than anything early on caused us to stop going to church. And after a while, my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, you know what? I much prefer hanging out at home with you and with the kids than I do in a church. So it was one of these gradual things that just kept chipping away. And I was for a long I think I had already come around to the point where I had decided I don't believe any of this anymore. But I was terrified of telling my wife about this because I love her and I wanted to be married, to stay married to her, and I was terrified of what this might do to our marriage. So I avoided it at all costs. I avoided it, and it came as an enormous relief to me when one day she just came up to me and said, "You know what? I don't think I believe this stuff anymore." Oh, thank God. Hey, guess what? Me neither. Oh, shoo. We can go on and live our lives now. I know, right? So, yeah. I think that's my story. Out of faith.
Let me add some icing on the cake because this has been an amazing story, Dr. Kip. I really, really love what you did here. Your story to your deconversion and the fact that now you can live happily ever after without having to worry about the tension in your relationship because one is a believer, unequally yoked, that kind of thing. Then there's also the children and the upbringing there. I don't need to get any further into the deepness of your own family situation and where your family is. But I am curious to know, since you've come back from Norway, you're in Canada, and then your appearances on YouTube and stuff. Can you fill us in on this and what you see your role as? What do you think when you wake up in the morning or you project a mirror of yourself in the world? How are you trying to present yourself? What is your mission? What is your goal in the internet world?
Wow, what a great question. First of all, I want to say, coming back from Norway, I think the plan was, even though we didn't believe anymore, my wife and I, the plan was always to go back to church, mostly for the kids, just because we saw it as sort of a stable place for them, and circumstances being what they were. My contract was 3 years, but my wife ended up getting a job back home after 2 years, and she left with the kids to go and work this job, and I ended up alone there for like a full year. It was in some respects, certainly at first, it was so lonely and it was so hard right away. you know, all I had was work, and I literally, like, I got up at like 6 in the morning, and I started working, and I worked until I went to bed at 10 or 11 at night every single goddamn day. So it was the most productive year of my life. But wow, it was tough. When my wife went back with the kids, they started tried going back to church, but she was working really hard too, right? Because she's effectively working as a single mom. You know, we were still together, and this wasn't like, there was never any, I was going home to be with my family, right, as soon as I was done. But you know, she was effectively functioning as a single mom, so just way too tired to to do much more than just, you know, go to work, make sure the kids are healthy and fed and, you know, safe. And that's what she had time for. And they stopped. You know, they never got back to church. And I always kind of thought, oh, well, you know, when I come back and I'm able to be, you know, a contributing member to my family again, then, you know, we'll be able to do this. And it just never happened. It was one of those things where, you know, it just didn't happen. So yeah, like my life changed so much, I think, from that point prior to going to Norway and then coming back. Like, it was so different all of a sudden. And yeah, what does it look like now? Who am I now? What do I see as my goal, I guess, my contribution? I started the channel. So when I came back from Norway, I worked I worked a few contracts at my alma mater, Trinity Western University, an evangelical Christian school. Still, like, I'm still not publicly an atheist, which is the only way that I could continue to work at Trinity. I worked for a few years at Trinity as an atheist, while still holding my nose and signing off on that community covenant every year. But what could I needed the work, and it was, you know, it was sort of the only viable place for me to go when I came back. And I mean, I felt bad about being dishonest about this, but by the same token, I've been a Christian for so long, I could play the role. So, you know, I would go to my classes. One thing we never did in my classes was pray, I'll tell you that much. But, you know, it wasn't, some professors did, some didn't. It wasn't something that they cared too much about. But that's something we never did in my classes. So thank goodness for that. But if they had required it, I could have done it. You know, I put on a face while I was there teaching students, you know, of fostering their faith in Jesus. How weird is that? Here I am, an atheist professor who is doing his damnedest to make sure that these kids are still the best Christians they can be. And, you know, having, and a big part of the job, when you're teaching at an evangelical or a Christian school in a Bible department, is soothing all that angst that develops from the cognitive dissonance that you're developing by challenging them with historical, critical, biblical scholarship, right? So all this was going on. I started the YouTube channel in 2017, I think 2017 or 2018, something like that. And the reason I started, I had already been watching YouTube for a long time. I was a big fan of Logic, still am. I watched a lot of Aaron Ra. I watched Atheist Experience and Dillahunty, and you know, Josh Bowen popped up on my radar, and I'll be honest, My first impression when I watched Josh was, I could do that, right? I'm like, why am I not doing that? But I was not overly confident in my own skills working with the videos, right? But I started the channel because I was asked in whatever year that was, 2017, 2018, to do what's called an independent study at Trinity Western. If not every course is offered every year, a student has to take certain courses in order to graduate. And if a student comes up on the end of their at the end of their term, I guess they're close to graduation, and they're missing a course but it's not offered, then they can ask a professor to do a directed study, which is basically like a one-on-one course. They pay like shit. It's terrible. You barely get enough money to. I mean, it's really really awful. But anyways, that's beside the point. I was asked, and I agreed to do a directed study for a course that I taught quite a bit at Trinity, and it was one that the department deemed me good enough to ask me to teach it a few times, and that's my course on what was called Israelite religion and Old Testament theology. And this is the course that I've essentially developed for MVP courses. It's, you can imagine, it's quite a bit different now than I ever taught it at Trinity Western, but and it's like a million times better. But I was asked to teach this course, this independent study, and I thought, the best way to do this, I started uploading this stuff, and shortly after that, I made my very first video response to Michael Jones on a presentation he did on Genesis chapter 1 to 11. And I think at that point, and that's kind of my channel, right? I see my channel as a teaching tool and also a counter apologetics tool. Let's back up a little bit and talk about apologetics, because this is an important part also of my story. While I was a PhD student, I got a job at Trinity Western, working for a theologian, an apologist, who ran the department was called interdisciplinary studies, and he taught it as a Christian worldview. He taught it as Christian worldview courses. Every student at Trinity had to take one course, and they had to take it in their freshman year, and it was this introduction to Christian worldview. So it was a huge class. There was like 450 students. So he needed help with it, and that's what my job was. I was like liaising. He did all the lectures. I was liaising with students. I was doing, marking all the assignments. I was helping him out basically with whatever he needed. And then he taught this other course for all the seniors. Everybody who was graduating had to take developing a Christian worldview. And, that class it wasn't 450 students, but it was usually up to like 100 every year. And this is what I did. And it was so frustrating for me because of these courses being offered in a serious university promoting Christian apologetics. I mean, that's all it was. It was how to manage your faith in a critical world. How to respond to skeptics, how to how to make sense and harmonize all the problems in the Bible, how to properly view science in light of religion and Christianity. It was awful. But this, I think this really is where I started to pay attention to apologetics and to apologists. And I think it was in that moment that I founded on essentially uh, um, placating the feelings, placating the hurt feelings of insecure Christians. It is entirely in-house. It doesn't, the goal of apologetics, I am convinced, is modern apologetics is not about saving souls. It's about making Christians feel better about being Christians. And of course, the only way, as a biblical scholar, with so much of the problems within Christianity, especially the more fundamentalist or evangelical brands of Christianity, are centered on the Bible. The Bible is a problematic book because of the history, because of the very natural origins of the text and all the problems within the text. It's incredibly difficult for them to deal with, which is why apologetics is there. So it's all about helping Christians to get over their anxiety about the Bible. And the only way to do that is to do so through fabrications and weak arguments and, you know, exegetical and historical fallacies. So that pretty quickly became kind of my goal with at least my YouTube channel. I love the Bible. I am a Bible teacher. And I see my role as a Bible teacher and a content creator as helping people understand what the Bible is and why it's so great. Because it's not a great religious text, but it's a great piece of ancient literature. It's not a great book around which to construct your life and your worldview, but wow, is it interesting. Wow, is it exciting when you really get right down into the text and you understand it within its original context, when you understand it as from the perspective of the early readers and interpreters of the Bible. Wow, it just it to me, that's where it comes alive, and that's where it's exciting. And I think that's what people need to hear, because in my opinion, I mean, Josh was out there, and yeah, he was doing a good job of what he was doing, but it felt to me like there is a concerted need for quality Bible scholarship that was publicly accessible on YouTube, and in large part because so much of the stuff that was publicly accessible was coming from this apologetic perspective, where we're constantly forgiving the text and attempting to maintain this this horribly flawed hermeneutical model, which maintains this weird integrity of the text that we need as evangelical Christians. So, you know, moving forward, that's what I'm all about. I'm all about teaching the Bible. I'm all about countering apologetic nonsense when it comes to the Bible, and I'm still convinced too, even those apologists who want to fixate on philosophical arguments, or who, I don't know, want to fixate on scientific arguments for God. You can't ignore the Bible. No Christian can ignore the Bible. And because the Bible is so problematic, at one point or another, they're going to have to deal with someone like me.
Now, I'm no expert on these things, but Tom Hanks is hardly a sex symbol. He's no Brad Pitt. You never hear about him getting drunk, making a fool of himself, or having lurid love affairs. You never see him at all in the gossip mags. Even he admits he's a bit of a nerd. Yet somehow he's made an extraordinary career out of being very ordinary. His movies have made billions. Just the name Tom Hanks in big letters on the billboards can guarantee success. In fact, he's the biggest earner of them all. Add a couple of Oscars and other assorted accolades, and who said nice guys don't come first? It's a big night for Tom Hanks. We're in Tokyo at the premiere of his latest blockbuster.
Thank you.
And Hollywood's Mr. Nice Guy is working the line.
I'm going to talk to the #1 morning show.
He sticks to the script.
Do I remember this man?
Polite and charming. Until he reaches me.
Liam, you're on the road again. On the red carpet. Pretty glamorous, isn't it?
I don't know how you do it, really. You know, your face is everywhere. People are looking at your every move. You photographers all around you. Got a fake sincerity up and down the line. I don't know how you do it.
The fake sincerity thing. Well, I'm a professional, Liam. I think I faked my sincerity very well.
And here's me thinking you like me. There you go.
No, you're a very pleasant guy. I got nothing against you. I don't know you that well. You haven't pissed me off yet, so, you know.
There's still
okay.
time.
Yeah, well,
There's
yeah.
still time.
We'll wait. We got years to go.
You get the impression it'd be pretty hard to irritate Tom Hanks. He might be the biggest movie star on the planet, but there are no airs or graces. He's a very, very rare star. Funny, intelligent, and absolutely squeaky clean. Now, there's got to be some dirt somewhere.
No, I wish it was an image. I wish it was something I could drop. But you asked me, I'll tell you the truth. I don't lie.
Well, help me out here.
All right, okay. What do you need?
Let's dig some dirt.
You need some dirt? Okay. I floss my teeth. I have flossed my teeth every day for like the last 7 years. Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's not sounding scandalous.
Well, no, it's not a scandal, but when what that means is I never flossed my teeth once for the previous, 43 years or whatever it is.
You've got nothing.
I got nothing.
This is my dad. His name's Sam.
Scandal or no scandal, the fact is he's been extraordinarily successful.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
His movies have pulled in more than $4 billion at the box office and made him one of Hollywood's wealthiest actors.
Put it away. They're too close together. You don't have a clear shot.
Yes, I do. Put this rumor to rest, if you will, one way or the other. But the word is that from your new movie, Angels and Demons, you will be the highest paid actor ever, some 50 million US, which translates to what, about 70 million Australian.
Is that true?
Is it true?
It could be. I'm not saying it ain't. So.
Well, I suppose it's the same question I'd ask a Wall Street banker. Is anyone worth that much?
No. No, they're not. I'm not. But at the same time, it's a frivolous business at the end of the day because it's all supply and demand. If it does well, then I make a nice, tasty piece of cake. It's true. Can't lie. Whether or not anybody deserves it. Look, cops deserve that money. School teachers deserve that money. People who run food banks, they deserve that money. And I'd like to think that I wake up in the morning and do my part in order to make the world a better place.
Tom's world these days is very different to where he began. His parents divorced when he was just 4 years old. Tom and his 5 siblings had a chaotic childhood, traveling from place to place, as his dad and stepmother chased work. So with all those brothers and sisters and stepbrothers and stepsisters, you still had a fairly lonely childhood, did you?
I discovered in a good way my preoccupation with sort of like stories and art or whatever creativity you can call it when you're 8 or 9 or 10 years old was a good combat for loneliness, you know. I developed a real great attachment for going to school. I like school. Other kids will cut school. I thought school was kind of a great place. There was action there. But I knew something was going down there that would generate some sort of a laugh or some sort of a routine, or I would belong to something bigger than myself.
How long have you two been dressing up like women?
The loner had found his talent, making people laugh. His early work was mostly forgettable, but then came a guest spot on Happy Days, starring Ron Howard, now one of Hollywood's top directors. When you first met Tom, you were still Richie Cunningham.
Well, I was, as a matter of fact.
You're next, sister.
And Tom had done this very flashy guest shot on the show, and everybody fell in love with him and invited him to come on to this one softball game. I remember sitting next to him and just saying hello, and it wasn't more than, I think, 18 months or 2 years later that I was casting him in Splash.
Do you speak English?
Big break.
Yeah, he was going places because he's really a unique talent.
It was the start of a long and productive partnership for Hanks and Howard. The unlikely-looking duo went on to make Apollo 13.
Houston, we have a problem.
And the second biggest grossing movie of all time, The Da Vinci Code.
Here it is, here it is.
And have just teamed up for a fourth time for its sequel.
Angels and demons.
Tom says, he admits, he was a bit of a geek, a bit of a nerd. You had a reputation at one stage for being a bit of a nerd. But you've got together over the years a huge number of awards and millions of dollars. The nerds really have had their revenge, haven't they?
Well, we found projects that we could do, and I think that, look, that sort of fascination with detail is what makes a nerd. And,
and that obsession for detail runs deep.
Oh, there we go. Hello.
We know you have a very unusual hobby collection of old typewriters.
Uh-oh. Be careful now.
Right, so we've found something reasonably rare in Australia that we'd like to add.
A typewriter?
That's right. The world's most bankable star has a collection of more than 80 antique typewriters.
This is just, you know, somebody's junky old portable that was taking up space in their closet. That's one thing. But if this is an actual heirloom, an object of art, a piece of historical importance.
Well, we hope you like
You're going to intimidate. You're going to intimidate me. And let me. Here we go. Are we ready?
I hope you have a
Oh, dear Lord! Now here, let me tell you about this typewriter. Now you'll notice, it's a Corona.
Corona 3, yeah. But this is no ordinary Corona typewriter. It was owned by the legendary actor Richard Harris and dates back to 1912.
Get out.
Yeah. And when he died,
I don't deserve this.
It went to his wife. His wife sold it, as it turned out, to a fellow in Australia, and now we've brought it back here for you.
You guys should never have done this. You're wasting your time. I don't deserve to own Richard Harris's coffee mug, much less his. And I can almost get the paper in. Well, let's try it out anyway. Let's see that. All right. I probably screwed it up somehow, but this is a treasure, and I will treasure it forever.
Oh, I hope you like it.
So thank you very much.
Yeah. His sedate hobby is a world away from his on-screen heroics.
You called me.
In his latest religious whodunit, Hanks's character Robert Langdon has just 4 hours to save the Vatican from destruction.
Kind of annihilation. How violent?
A cataclysmic event.
It's very far-fetched, but typically he doesn't take it too seriously.
The city will be consumed by light.
Well, yeah, but it's not accurate, is it?
The Robert Langdon series. They're a bunch of hooey. There's no amount of antimatter is going to blow up Rome. It's as simple as that.
There's a scene of you in the movie in a pair of Speedos. Now, I want to know, was that a body double?
No, that was absolutely me. I volunteered for my non-American swimming apparel. I wanted to look like one of those Australian lifeguards, you know.
Sluggers. Yeah.
What are they called?
Sluggers.
Sluggers, okay, all right.
Has Daniel Craig seen that yet, and is he worried?
Man, oh man, I worked with Danny Craig back when he was just Danny Craig. And I don't want to embarrass him, but, the workout regimen, once you take on that gig, your life becomes the workout. You realize that, don't you? If there's another Langdon movie, I only have between now and the moment we're happening to that to avoid exercise. Because as soon as I go on the clock, guess where I am? I'm back in the pool. I'm back in that Speedo trying to look like a slugger.
Unlike so many Hollywood stars, Tom's never really enjoyed the spotlight. When the camera stops rolling, he spends every minute with his family, his 4 kids and wife of 22 years.
It's like that movie.
Actress Rita Wilson, who he starred alongside in Sleepless in Seattle.
That's a chick's movie. Rita Wilson is the most fantastic creature on the planet. Simple as that. We've made most of the, mistakes that anybody can make, but at the same time, we're always in it for the right. There's no secret to this other than marrying the right person. That's it. That's the only thing that is required.
You once said that Rita saved your life. What do you mean by that?
Well, she gave me a type of social grace I didn't understand. My family is a fractured one. Rita, it comes from she's Greek. She comes from a family that has a lot of heritage, a family that is used to seeing each other all the time, that really can't live without siding up to each other every now and saying how to do. And I didn't realize that was an option. I didn't realize that was something that you could make happen until I married Rita Wilson.
That's a love story in itself, better than any of your scripts.
Oh, it is, and that's why why are there not movies about 21-year-old marriages? It's always about, it's the same old thing. It's always about fall in love, it's always like boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. But the happily ever after is always ever after.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Hanks.
There's something very decent and proper about Tom Hanks. He's an actor with a social conscience.
Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history.
He was one of President Obama's most high-profile supporters and looked so at ease at the inauguration ceremony, many wondered if a political career was beckoning.
That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
You'll run eventually, won't you?
No way. Never in a million years.
The ultimate trifecta. Reagan, Schwarzenegger, Hanks.
See, here's the thing. Ronald Reagan, they stopped giving him jobs. But I'm not a political animal, but I pay attention to the cultural zeitgeist that's going on, and politics is a big part of it, particularly when, hey man, your country is at war, and it is for 8 years, and there's so much important stuff that's going on. I pay attention to it, but I don't try to influence any more than my own opinions.
Fans will be relieved to hear that Tom is sticking to acting. But his days of playing the fresh-faced big kid are firmly behind him. Next thing you know, you're 52.
Yeah, in a good way. Yeah. Wink of an eye, all right. And you're not even reminded of how old you are until you see those clips from a long time ago. You're like, who's that kid? Oh, that's me, son of a gun.
There is, of course, one role where Tom never ages, where any imperfection can be erased in a second.
And there seems to be no sign of intelligent life anywhere.
Hello? Oh, yeah.
Tom's back for the 3rd part of the Toy Story juggernaut next year.
Sorry, howdy. My name is Woody.
What have you been doing for the past 10 years?
Well, professional responsibility tells me that I should keep it as cryptic as possible. So I would say that let's just say...
Come on. Let's
say that there's are the toys going to be sent to the attic or not? Let's leave it at that.
Oh, that's a...
How about that?
But you like these movies, don't you?
Well, I like movies that everybody can relate to. When the dad and the mom can appreciate it on one level and everybody else can see it on their own level as well. I think that's what all the great films have been able to do.
See, Mr. Nice Guy, we've come full circle.
I can't help it.
So you leave me with no dirt, there's no scandal, nothing.
But what do you get the written letter that I'm going to send to you? It's going to have foul language, and it's going to have the confessions on paper that I will not give you on video, but you'll get it all. You'll get it all.
I can hardly wait.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.
When I see someone I have a crush on, does my heart literally skip a beat? No, but it can speed up, and you could even have something known as a PVC. Like a PVC is a premature ventricular contraction, where your heart like beats, but nothing really happens. So it's like an incomplete beat, if you will. But they happen rarely, and without symptoms, usually pretty benign. So the answer is maybe. Help, I fart really hard and it hurts. How do I fix this? Is there a name? Fart splints or something? Sam, you know what it is. Painful fart.
Sam, you've got
The answer is what's going on. Sometimes there's hemorrhoids, and there's two different types of hemorrhoids, internal and external. External is usually the ones you feel because they're past the pectate line. There's also anal fissures that can bleed quite badly. You can actually end up getting a cream that's called nifedipine. It's compounded with usually some lidocaine or some other numbing agent that allows that sphincter to relax a bit and heal better. There are surgeries, obviously, but those are for more advanced cases. Someone please tell me, if you had no bones, could you still move? No. No. Anything so you couldn't move. Why do vegetables taste bad? Why can't they just taste good? I disagree. I think an asparagus in my mouth after a steak is wonderful. Asparagus, right? I'm Googling it. It's either asparagus or asparaguses. I take back my asparagus. There are no asparagus in my mouth. Only asparagus.
I'm so...
That sounds weird. I'm 25 years old. I've never had a nosebleed. I would very much like to experience one. How would you... No. What am I reading? How do I know if I have a slow metabolism and whether I need to speed it up? Unless there's an issue, meaning you're struggling to lose weight and you've been documented to be there's a health condition that's being impacted by the fact that you're overweight, I wouldn't worry about your metabolism per se. And in general, the things that you would do to live a healthy lifestyle will help you maintain a healthy metabolism. I wouldn't think about it as slower or faster, because a too fast of a metabolism is also problematic, and too slow is problematic. So ideally, you want a balanced metabolism, and a balanced metabolism is one that comes with a healthy lifestyle. Obviously, there are some factors outside of your control, but that's when diseases happen, and that's when a doctor should intervene. All of your hiccup cures are just the top results on Google. What makes you any better than just Googling what's wrong with me? I guess you can. It's just Google's gonna give you a lot of info, and it's gonna be in text and boring. Versus here, we're having fun and enjoying the time together. Hey, how are you doing?
How you doing?
I've been having a lot of problems with excessive sweating. I know you've dealt with this a lot, so do you have any advice? Become okay with sweating is a good piece of advice, and I've become better with it, understanding that it's kind of part of life. There are prescription strength deodorants that you could use. You could even use them on your palms if that happens there. There are injections like Botox that you could inject directly into sweat glands. I've never went down this route, but I've heard people do it, and I've met doctors that do it with good results. You just have to do it maybe a couple times in order to get longer lasting results. I don't know. Kind of just sweat and live. You got so triggered in your last meme review by people saying they shower at night. I shower at night because it keeps my bed cleaner when I go to sleep. Do you really think showering in the morning is better? Yes! And I take a passionate stance on this, and I want to argue with everybody in the comment section that I prefer to shower in the morning, and that's the logical way to go. Let's lay out a list of pros and cons of showering in the morning versus at night. Let's say you shave very frequently, and you get some nicks sometimes. Maybe it's better to shower in the morning. Why? Because you have more platelets in the morning. Interesting, fun medical fact. Let's say you're stressed out when you wake up in the morning, or you need a little creativity bump. It's a good time to do it right there in the morning. And you know what you do at night? You sweat. Usually more than you sweat during the day, with the exception of exercise, obviously. You're gonna have oil in the night, you're gonna have sweat in the night, clogged pores in the night, so waking up in the morning and showering gets you ready for the day, cleans off your body, and makes you ready to go on. The only thing I would say is if you're gonna shower in the morning, shower a little bit cooler, because warmer might make you sleepy and wanna go back to bed. But now, for the people that like to shower at night, ideally, if you are doing this, it can help you fall asleep, especially if you do it like 90 minutes before. You keep it short, like 5 to 15 minutes, because if you're exposed to a lot of heat for longer than that, it can actually be activating instead of sedating. Benefits, obviously, throughout the day, you get dirty, oil, all that stuff, and therefore you might not want to bring that into bed, which can be acnegenic, causing some clogged pores and stuff. Also, it might be better to shower at night if you're sun sensitive, because if you exfoliate, for example, and then you go out in the sun, that might be a problem because your skin's more sensitive. But if you exfoliate at night, for the morning, you're ready to take on the day. And probably the best reason for most people that have allergies to shower at night is because you wash off all the pollen that you got on you, and then you don't bring it into bed so you sneeze less. Do with that what you will. But for me, morning shower, and like post-exercise, obviously. because you don't want yeast and all that stuff developing. Did you become a doctor because your father forced you? Because I think you'd be a better stand-up comedian. Okay, you're probably being sarcastic. No, my father didn't force me, and I would not be a better stand-up comedian. I would like to try my hand at it. I kind of did on the live tour, and I had like 2 good jokes. In order to see them, you have to come to the next edition of the live tour, whenever that's happening. Is Bear in a Jeep Grand Cherokee commercial? There is a Newfoundland dog named Bear in the Jeep Grand Cherokee commercial, and I am kind of upset that they didn't use my bear. Bear, you know you're in a commercial? Come here. Have you been secretly going out and earning in the night Jeep Grand Cherokee ads? I should get at least a little cut. I feed you. Wow. I don't care if you're working without my permission. Come here. But you do need your working papers, all right, son? Just next time you do a commercial, can you do it for like a Lamborghini so they give us one for free? Do people actually sleepwalk? How can I make sure it never happens to me? You can't make sure, but if you sleep well, you sleep the same number of hours consistently, you don't take any substances that impact your sleep, the risk of you sleepwalking decreases, but you can't be 100% protective of it. Is it normal to have migraines every single day? No, absolutely not. In fact, while we have medications that are abortive in nature that stop migraines, there's also medications that are preventive in nature and that prevent migraines from coming on, and you should discuss those with your doctor. And not all of them are labeled migraine medications. Some of them are like heart rate medications, that like beta blockers that actually help with migraines, or antidepressants that can be used off-label for migraines. So worth a discussion. When the doctor asks if I'm on any prescription drug, should I tell him I'm using prescription toothpaste, or does that not count? I've yet to hear about prescription toothpaste, but absolutely it counts. It should be, are you taking anything, period? Like prescription or non-prescription, those things still have side effects. So I don't even understand the distinction between the two unless you're asking to refill a prescription and send something to the pharmacy. I never just ask my patients, are you taking any medications? Are you taking any medications? Are you taking any supplements, any creams, etc.? So toothpaste absolutely falls into that category, prescription toothpaste, because that's not just like a regular over-the-counter product. Are breads that have a bunch of visible seeds in them actually healthier than bread that doesn't? Or is that just a marketing trick to seem healthier? Well, first of all, Lizzie, some people enjoy those seeds. Like, for example, I like bread with pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds on it. I think there's a big factor to be had with flavor. There's also different macros that come with those breads, because depending on the type of seed, you may increase the protein concentration. Also, the big hack that comes from having seeds is fiber. If you don't mind the seeds, I add them on. Can I become more tolerant of mental health medication? 30 milligrams used to do the trick, but it doesn't feel like it has the same effect anymore. Have I gotten used to it? It really depends which medication you're talking about, because some medications absolutely do have a tolerance building effect. Xanax, as an example, like those are benzodiazepines. The answer is it depends. Do you have a workout playlist you can share? I don't. I just like use dance workout playlist. Actually, I could show you a picture of it. Workout music hits 2023. It's a really random playlist, but I like it. Is it better to hydrate myself with warm or cold water? There's probably no perfect answer to that. Really cold, not ideal. Really hot, above 140, we've seen rates of esophageal cancer going up. So again, stay away from the extremes. What is the actual risk of drinking alcohol if you're on painkillers? What could actually happen? Well, it depends which painkillers you're talking about. If you're talking about opioids, obviously there's the risk of respiratory depression. And then if you pass out, you can aspirate your own vomit and die. When you're drinking alcohol, you're less likely to make good decisions. So you could take too much of the painkiller and OD. When it comes to like stuff like Tylenol, it takes a load onto your liver because your liver actively needs to filtrate it. And in fact, some of the biggest hospitalizations for liver failure come from an overuse of acetaminophen, which is the active ingredient in Tylenol. And then when it comes to like the Advils and Motrins of the world, these are NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And those can actually have an impact on your stomach lining, which then by drinking alcohol, which irritates the stomach lining, kind of has a doubling effect of irritation, causing worsening gastritis, especially if you have an ulcer. Is it true that eating poppy seeds on a bagel can cause you to fail a drug test? How long does it take for those seeds to clear your system? You know, it's a good question. I don't know, but anecdotally, I have heard this to be true. Specifically in like armed forces and police officer exams, they tell you not to use those products. Is it healthy and safe to eat insects like crickets? I'm seeing them become more popular here in Europe, and I'm skeptical. If they've been prepared by an adequate food agency, I don't know what the equivalent of FDA is in Europe, then I don't see why that would be a problem. Eating them fresh off the ground, I can imagine that some things could go wrong. I don't know, not really a wildlife expert. So is playing chess an exercise? Because when I play, my heart rate goes way up. You know, I used to think no, but there's been articles coming out of individuals losing a significant significant number of pounds while playing chess in tournaments, you know, glucose feeds the brain. So it obviously burns some calories, your heart rate goes up. I would say that it's an imperfect exercise because it doesn't make use of your muscles, your musculoskeletal system, and as a result, you can develop aches, pains by being in the same locked-in position. I would say incomplete exercise, but a good exercise nonetheless. Val, what time of day is best for working out? Can I make more progress going in the morning, for example? Is there a time of day the body's more primed for exercise? I've seen this go both ways within my patient population, even for myself. For example, if I'm gonna do a low intensity, long exercise session, doing it at night doesn't bother me. It actually helps me fall asleep real well. But if I was to do sprints and doing them close to bedtime at night when I dump all of that adrenaline, it's actually hard to fall asleep and I need some time to wind down. Also, some people are not early morning risers, so when they wake up, they don't feel great. That works also even more both ways, that some people will start exercising and feel better, therefore that's kind of their hack to getting started. And other people just don't get good adequate performance and they would prefer to work out later in the day. But medically speaking, we don't have a thorough answer for that. You said sweating more means you pee less. Does the same apply to crying? Can I cry so much I never pee? Never pee, no, because you're still going to be using liquids unless you stop drinking and then you keep crying. Ultimately, your tears will dry up probably before your pee. In fact, if I see a child in the emergency room and their lips are dry and they're crying and I don't see tears, I'm really worried about dehydration. Why do I get hiccups anytime I eat any really spicy foods? Oh, that's probably because you're irritating your diaphragm and your diaphragm starts to have like a spasm in it. If you take like an inhale, then a little bit more inhale without exhaling, and then another one real quick, really fast and really hard, it actually stops the hiccup. I don't know how, it like paralyzes your diaphragm or something. What advice do you have about whether a patient should go see a doctor that works in a giant hospital and a healthcare system versus seeing a doctor with a small local private practice? I think most days, doctors that are even local private practice are affiliated with bigger institutions. I'm a fan of having a small local physician that you have a good rapport with and a long-standing relationship with. And then if something is outside of their practice or their abilities to help you, they have a healthcare system behind them that they can refer you to. But a giant hospital could be really good if you have a rare condition or obviously like a level 1 trauma or something like that. Why do I keep getting Charlie horses in my legs when I'm trying to sleep at night? Most commonly for young, healthy, athletic people, this happens as a result of fatigue. If you over-fatigue a muscle, especially if you start a new exercise regimen, you go a little too hard, you could start developing those types of cramps. Also, there's obviously issues with electrolytes in some people that are maybe dehydrated or they're not just taking in enough electrolytes. How can I learn to swallow a pill? Oh, there's actually really useful diagrams on Harvard that they show. I'm showing them here about using a water bottle where you actually suck the water bottle and allows you to swallow the pill better. Obviously, there's certain pills that you can crush and like sprinkle into yogurt or applesauce or something. Just be careful, not all pills are able to do that. Make sure you read the instructions really carefully. Why does a baby become comforted by a pacifier? It tricks the baby into thinking they're being fed, I presume. It's the suck reflex, so makes sense. I'm not a huge fan because it changes the development of the baby's mouth. I try to minimize pacifier use, or at least encourage my patients to minimize pacifier use. But that being said, I understand a crying baby is very difficult, so I understand the need for a pacifier. Is rosacea a bad thing? I've always had it, but always thought it was just one of my beauty traits. Well, it really depends what's causing your red cheeks. A lot of times doctors will say it's rosacea, but it could be rosacea plus something else. I would more so look at the symptoms, how much they're bothering you, what else is going on in your body. Generally speaking, rosacea is just kind of a blood vessel issue that causes some discoloration on your skin that usually is localized to the area, but not in every case. Sometimes rosacea can be paired with autoimmune conditions, for example, or rosacea can be diagnosed when there's really a more correct diagnosis like lupus and you get the butterfly rash. So you gotta be really careful when it comes to rashes. Chris Collins, AKA Call Me Chris, actually shared some really intimate stories on this podcast. I highly recommend you check out the Checkup Podcast with Chris Collins. As always, stay happy and healthy.
According to the headlines, last year's Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded for showing that the universe is not locally real, or for spooky quantum behavior and spooky action at a distance, or for exploring quantum weirdness. What's that supposed to mean? Is the universe really not locally real, or not really local, or not really real? That's what we'll talk about today. My grad plan for this video is that we'll first look at what locality means, then we'll talk about quantum mechanics, and then we'll combine both. Let's start with locality. You all know what locality means. It means if you want to go to New York City, you don't just disappear from Heathrow and reappear at JFK. You must get on a plane, fly in a seat through the sky, and then drag yourself into the immigration queue at US Customs. There's no instantaneous going anywhere. It's not just travel, it's generally any interaction. You can only act on things next to you. And it's not just you. No, really, I swear. Anything can only interact with things right next to it. This is what we mean by locality. Non-locality would basically be a portal. Something goes in and instantaneously appears elsewhere. Now, if you could travel non-locally, that might allow you to go faster than light, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Alice could go to Tokyo faster than light without taking a portal. Bob could go through a lame portal that brings him to New York even later than Air France and leaves his bag in Paris again. So, non-locality and faster-than-light travel are two separate things. But the two are related in that Expedia isn't offering either. Maybe more importantly, though not unrelatedly, neither of them is allowed in Einstein's theories of space and time. Yes, that guy again. We can make a little drawing to see what this means. This is a space-time diagram. The horizontal axis is one dimension of space, say left or right. The vertical axis is time. If you don't move but sit still, that's described by a vertical line in this diagram. If you move at a constant velocity, that makes a line at a fixed angle. By convention, a 45-degree angle is the speed of light. According to Einstein, nothing can go faster than light. This means if an event happens here, then anything that can be influenced by this event must lie within a region that's bounded by 45-degree lines emerging from the event. This boundary is called the future light cone, and the region that can be influenced from the event is that inside the future light cone. Likewise, there's a region which contains everything that can influence the event, which is the inside of the past light cone. If something could go faster than the speed of light, it could enter your light cone like this. And if non-locality was